During family dinner, my son said, "Sign the house over to me or spend Christmas alone." Those words hit me like ice water thrown in my face. I felt something inside me break that night, something that had been cracking for years. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. I am 72 years old, and I live in a small row house in Brooklyn that my late husband Samuel and I bought 43 years ago. The mortgage payments seemed impossible back then, but we scraped together every dollar. Samuel worked double shifts at the shipyard, and I cleaned houses in Park Slope during the day and worked at a diner on Atlantic Avenue at night. Our hands were raw, our backs ached, but we had a dream. This house was going to be our legacy, our children's inheritance, the foundation of everything we built together. The walls still hold the scent of Samuel's aftershave and my Sunday pot roasts. The kitchen linoleum is worn thin where I've stood cooking thousands of meals. The staircase banister is smooth from decades of hands gripping it. First ours, then our children's, then our grandchildren's. Every corner holds a memory, every room tells a story of love, sacrifice, and hope. But that December evening, as snow began to fall outside the dining room window, I realized that the people sitting around my table saw none of that history. They saw only dollar signs. My son Michael, 45 now with silver threading through his dark hair, sat across from me with his arms crossed. His wife Jennifer picked at her food, avoiding my eyes. Their two teenagers, Emma and Jake, stared at their phones as if nothing was happening. My daughter Sarah had driven up from New Jersey with her husband Tom and their 8-year-old son Danny. The table was full, but the room felt empty. I had spent 3 days preparing this meal. My arthritic hands struggled with the turkey. My back screamed as I bent to check the oven, but I wanted everything perfect. I wanted them to remember why family mattered. I wanted them to see that this house wasn't just brick and mortar. It was the heart of who we were. Instead, Michael cleared his throat and delivered his ultimatum like a business presentation. "Mom, we've been talking. You're getting older, you shouldn't be alone in this big house. It's not safe. The neighborhood's changing. You need to think about what's practical." I set down my fork carefully. "What are you saying, Michael?" "We think you should sign the house over to me. I'll take care of everything. You can move into one of those nice senior communities. They have activities. People your own age. You'd be happier." The words landed like stones in my stomach. "This is my home, Michael. Your father and I built our life here." Jennifer finally looked up. "Mom, be reasonable. You can't maintain this place forever. The roof needs work, the heating system is old. We're trying to help you." Sarah nodded, though she looked uncomfortable. "It would give you peace of mind, knowing it's handled." I looked around the table at these people I had given everything for. These were the children I had rocked to sleep, nursed through fevers, cheered at school plays and graduations. These were the people I had worked myself to the bone to provide for. And now they sat in my dining room eating my food, asking me to give up the only security I had left. "And if I don't?" I asked quietly. Michael's jaw tightened. "Then you'll spend Christmas alone. We can't keep worrying about you, Mom. It's affecting our families. Either you do what's best for everyone, or you handle things on your own." The silence that followed felt like a vacuum. Even the teenagers looked up from their phones, sensing something momentous was happening. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't cry in front of them. Not yet. "I need to think about it," I said finally. Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Take your time. But we need an answer soon." They left shortly after, making excuses about traffic and early mornings. I stood at the window watching their cars disappear into the Brooklyn night, their taillights like red tears in the darkness. I went to the kitchen and began washing dishes with shaking hands. The water was too hot, but I didn't adjust it. The pain felt appropriate somehow. As I scrubbed the gravy boat Samuel's mother had given us as a wedding gift, I finally let the tears come. How had it come to this? When had I become a burden instead of the matriarch? When had my children stopped seeing me as their mother and started seeing me as an obstacle? I thought about all the years I had given them, all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, all the dreams I had deferred so they could have better lives than Samuel and I had known. I remembered when Michael was 7 and broke his leg falling from the oak tree in our backyard. I sat beside his hospital bed for 3 days straight, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, feeding him ice chips, reading him story after story. When he developed complications and needed surgery, I sold my grandmother's wedding ring to pay the medical bills our insurance wouldn't cover. I remembered Sarah's first heartbreak at 16. She cried in my arms for hours while I stroked her hair and told her she was beautiful, that any boy who couldn't see her worth wasn't worthy of her tears. I took time off work. I couldn't afford to take her shopping for a new dress. Something to make her feel special again. I remembered working 3 jobs when Michael wanted to go to college. The acceptance letter from Fordham came on a Tuesday, and by Friday, I had picked up extra cleaning shifts and started dog walking for neighbors. My hands were cracked and bleeding from all the cleaning chemicals, but Michael graduated debt-free. I remembered babysitting Emma and Jake every weekend for years when Michael and Jennifer wanted date nights. I fed them, bathed them, read them bedtime stories, loved them as fiercely as I had loved their father. I taught Emma to braid friendship bracelets and helped Jake with his math homework when numbers didn't make sense to his 8-year-old brain. I remembered helping Sarah through her divorce, letting her and Danny stay with me for 6 months while she got back on her feet. I held her as she cried about her failed marriage, and I held Danny as he adjusted to his parents living apart. I never asked for rent or groceries. I just opened my home and my heart. I remembered countless Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduations, and celebrations I had hosted in this house. I had cooked and cleaned and decorated and smiled until my cheeks hurt. I had made this house a place of love and warmth and tradition, a place where my family wanted to gather. And now they wanted me to sign it away. They wanted me to give up the only thing I had left of the life Samuel and I built together. I finished the dishes and wandered through the house, touching familiar objects like old friends, the piano where Sarah had practiced scales for hours, the built-in bookshelf where we had measured the children's heights with pencil marks, the kitchen table where we had eaten thousands of meals, done homework, played board games, celebrated and commiserated, and simply lived our lives. In the living room, I stopped in front of the mantelpiece. Photographs covered every inch. Baptisms and birthdays, holidays and everyday moments. Michael's Little League team picture from 1985, Sarah in her prom dress, Emma's first day of kindergarten, Jake scoring his first soccer goal. In the center was my wedding photograph. Samuel and I, young and full of hope, standing outside the little church in Bensonhurst where we were married. We had $28 between us and no idea how we'd make it work. But we had each other, and we had faith that love would be enough. I picked up the frame and traced Samuel's face with my finger. "What would you do, my love?" I whispered. "How do I protect what we built without losing the children we raised?" But Samuel couldn't answer. Samuel had been gone for 3 years now, taken by a heart attack so sudden and fierce that I didn't even get to say goodbye. One moment he was reading the morning paper at the kitchen table, complaining about the Mets' pitching rotation, and the next moment he was gone. The months after his death had been the darkest of my life. The house felt too big and too quiet. The bed felt too wide. The silence was deafening. Michael and Sarah had been attentive at first, calling every day, stopping by with groceries, including me and family dinners. But as the weeks turned to months, their visits became less frequent, their calls shorter. I understood. They had their own lives, their own problems, their own families to care for. Grief is exhausting for everyone, not just the grieving. But understanding didn't make the loneliness any easier to bear. I had tried to fill the silence. I volunteered at the local food bank. I joined a book club at the library. I took up crossword puzzles and watched cooking shows on the Food Network. I learned to fix small things around the house that Samuel had always handled. I painted the front door a cheerful yellow and planted flowers in the window boxes. But nothing could fill the Samuel-shaped hole in my life. Nothing could replace the comfort of sharing my day with someone who cared about every small detail. Nothing could substitute for the security of knowing that someone would notice if I didn't get up in the morning. Maybe my children were right. Maybe I was foolish to cling to this house, to these memories, to this life I had built with a man who was no longer here to share it. But the thought of leaving felt like betraying Samuel's memory. It felt like admitting that everything we had worked for, everything we had sacrificed for, had been meaningless. I put the photograph back and went upstairs to my bedroom. The floorboards creaked familiarly under my feet. I sat on the edge of the bed Samuel and I had shared for 45 years and looked around the room that held so many memories. This was where we had whispered our dreams in the darkness after the children were. This was where we had held each other through sick nights and scary times and moments of doubt. This was where we had made love and made plans and made peace after arguments that seemed earth-shattering at the time, but now felt trivial. This was where I had conceived Michael and Sarah. This was where I had told Samuel I was pregnant each time, watching his face light up like Christmas morning. This was where we had worried about money and mortgages and whether we were good enough parents. This was where we had celebrated promotions and grieved disappointments and planned for a future that seemed infinite. This was where I held Samuel's hand as the paramedics worked on him, where I whispered, "I love you," one last time to a man who could no longer hear me. How could I leave this room? How could I leave this house? How could I sign away the only proof that Samuel and I had existed, had loved, had mattered? I opened the drawer of my bedside table and pulled out the deed to the house. The paper was yellowed with age. the signature lines filled with Samuel's confident handwriting and my careful script. We had signed this document with such pride, such hope, such certainty, that we were building something permanent. The house was worth a fortune now. The Brooklyn real estate market had exploded in recent years, and our modest row house in what was once a working-class neighborhood was now worth well over $1 million. Samuel and I had paid $38,000 for it in 1980. We thought that was an impossible sum then. I understood why my children wanted this house. It represented financial security, college funds for the grandchildren, retirement cushions for people in their 40s who were feeling the weight of mortgages and car payments and ever-rising costs of living. But it represented something different to me. It represented a lifetime of love and sacrifice and small daily acts of devotion. It represented proof that Samuel and I had lived, had loved, had built something lasting together. The next morning, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become a close friend in the years since Samuel's death. Carmen Rodriguez was 78, a widow herself, and the closest thing to family I had left, who actually treated me like family. Carmen came over with a pot of coffee and her direct, no-nonsense wisdom. We sat at my kitchen table and I told her what had happened at dinner, how my children wanted me to sign over the house. Carmen listened without interrupting, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee mug, her dark eyes full of understanding. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mija," she said finally, using the Spanish endearment that always made me feel loved. "Let me tell you something. I have 5 children. 3 of them are good to me. 2 of them treat me like a burden. But you know what I learned? Children who love you don't give you ultimatums." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Your Samuel, God rest his soul, would he want you to be bullied? Would he want you to give up everything you built together because your children are impatient for their inheritance?" I shook my head, tears starting again. "Then you know what you have to do. But you need help. You need someone in your corner who understands the law, who can protect you from your own children. Because that's what this is, Rosa. Your own children are trying to manipulate you." Carmen gave me the name of a lawyer in downtown Brooklyn, a woman who specialized in elder law. She helped my sister when her son was trying to get power of attorney. She's good, and she's honest. That afternoon, I took the subway into the city for the first time in months. The trip felt overwhelming. The crowds, the noise, the pace of everyone rushing past me. I felt invisible and fragile, a gray-haired woman in a world that seemed designed for younger, more confident people. But I made it to the law office, a small practice in a converted brownstone near the courthouse. Margaret Chen was probably my daughter's age, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Her office was cluttered with case files and family photographs, and she offered me tea before we began talking. I told her everything: the dinner, the ultimatum, my fears about being alone, my confusion about what was right. She listened carefully, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. "Mrs. Martinez," she said when I finished, "I need to ask you some direct questions. Do you still feel capable of living independently? Are you managing your finances? Are you keeping up with the house maintenance?" I thought about it honestly. I hire people to help with the heavy cleaning and yard work. I have a handyman who comes monthly to check on things. I manage my own money. Samuel left me comfortable, and I'm careful with spending. I drive during the day, though I don't like driving at night anymore. I'm healthy for my age, just the usual aches and pains. She nodded. "And do you want to stay in your house?" "Yes, more than anything. It's my home. It's where my life with my husband happened. It's where my memories live." "Then here's what we're going to do. We're going to create some legal protections for you. A trust that ensures no one can pressure you into signing over property. A healthcare directive that makes your wishes clear. And we're going to have a conversation with your children about what elder abuse looks like in the eyes of the law." The word abuse hit me like a slap. "It's not abuse, they're worried about me." Margaret's expression was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Martinez, threatening to abandon you if you don't give them valuable property is a form of financial and emotional abuse. I see this more often than you'd imagine. Adult children who decide their inheritance is more important than their parents' autonomy." Over the following days, Margaret helped me put protections in place. The house went into a trust that I controlled completely during my lifetime, with clear instructions that it could not be transferred under duress or coercion. I created a will that was fair but firm, leaving the house to be sold upon my death with proceeds divided equally among my children and grandchildren, but only if they had maintained respectful relationships with me. I also joined a support group for older adults dealing with family financial pressure. I was shocked to learn how common my situation was. Story after story of children demanding property transfers, threatening abandonment, treating aging parents like obstacles to their financial dreams, rather than people deserving respect and autonomy. I met Eleanor, 81, whose son had moved into her house and refused to leave, claiming he was taking care of her, while he sold her furniture piece by piece. I met Frank, 77, whose daughter had gained access to his bank accounts and was slowly draining them for her own expenses. I met Maria, 68, whose children had told her she was selfish for not wanting to give them their inheritance early. These were good people, people who had loved and sacrificed and devoted their lives to their families, and their families were taking advantage of that love, weaponizing it against them. I realized that what was happening to me wasn't personal failure on my part. It wasn't proof that I had been a bad mother or that my children were inherently cruel. It was part of a pattern, a societal problem where aging parents were seen as resources to be managed rather than people to be respected. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. Christmas was 3 weeks away. Michael called twice asking if I had thought about our conversation. Each time I told him I was still considering it. Each time he sounded more impatient. Sarah called too, her voice strained. "Mom, Michael says you're being difficult about the house. We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me," I said carefully, "is being treated with respect and love, not ultimatums." "It's not an ultimatum, Mom. It's practical. You know we love you." "Do I?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Because love doesn't usually come with conditions, Sarah." There was a long pause. "I'll call you later, Mom. I need to think about this." She didn't call back. I spent those weeks preparing for a Christmas alone. I bought a small tree and decorated it with ornaments that held decades of memories. Paper angels the children had made in elementary school. A ceramic Santa that Samuel had given me our first Christmas in the house. Photo ornaments from family trips and celebrations. Each ornament told a story of love and time and attention. Looking at them, I couldn't understand how the children who had made these treasures, who had been part of these memories, could now be so willing to cut me out of their lives. I bought ingredients for a Christmas dinner for one. A small turkey breast, packages of stuffing mix, a pie from the bakery instead of the homemade desserts I usually spent days preparing. The grocery shopping was heartbreaking, scaling down recipes I had made for crowds, walking past the large turkeys and family-sized everything, accepting that this year would be different. The week before Christmas, my doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I opened it to find Emma, Michael's 16-year-old daughter, standing on my stoop with tears streaming down her face. "Grandma, can I come in, please?" I pulled her inside, wrapping her in the kind of fierce hug I had been saving up for weeks. She clung to me, sobbing, and for a moment she was 7 years old again, crying because she had scraped her knee in my backyard. We sat in the living room, and I made her hot chocolate with marshmallows the way I always had. Finally, she was calm enough to talk. "Grandma, I heard my parents fighting about you in the house. Dad was saying terrible things. He said you were being selfish and stubborn. Mom was crying. She said she felt terrible, but that maybe Dad was right, that maybe you weren't thinking clearly anymore." Each word was like a knife to my heart, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Emma looked around the living room, at the photographs and memories that filled every surface. "I think this is your house. I think Dad is being a jerk. I think I don't like who my parents are being right now." She paused, then looked at me with eyes that seemed much older than 16. "Grandma, are you really going to be alone for Christmas?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "That's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't have to choose between your house and your family. That's cruel." Out of the mouths of babes. My 16-year-old granddaughter could see what her parents apparently could not. "I want to spend Christmas with you," she said. "I don't care what my parents say. This is stupid and mean, and I won't be part of it." I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been frozen solid since that terrible dinner. "Emma, honey, I can't let you fight with your parents because of me. You're not making me do anything, Grandma. I'm choosing. I'm old enough to choose." We talked for 2 more hours. Emma told me about school, about her friends, about her hopes for college. Normal grandmother-granddaughter conversation that felt precious beyond measure. When she left, she hugged me again and whispered, "I love you, Grandma. Don't let them bully you." That night, Michael called, furious. "What did you say to Emma? She came home talking about spending Christmas with you, refusing to listen to reason about the house situation." I told her the truth, Michael, that you've given me an ultimatum to sign over my house or spend Christmas alone. It's not an ultimatum, Mom. It's a practical solution to a real problem. The only problem I see is that my son is trying to manipulate me into giving him property worth over $1 million. The silence on the other end was telling. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice cold. "Fine. You've made your choice. Don't call me when you're lying on the floor unable to get up. Don't call me when some criminal breaks into that house because everyone knows there's an elderly woman living alone. Don't call me when you realize what a mistake you're making." He hung up. I sat holding the phone for a long time, wondering how my sweet little boy who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms had become this stranger who spoke to me with such cruelty. But something had shifted inside me during my conversation with Emma. Seeing the situation through her eyes, seeing the basic unfairness that even a 16-year-old could recognize, had clarified things for me. I was not wrong to want to keep my home. I was not wrong to expect respect from my children. I was not wrong to refuse to be manipulated and threatened. Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold. I had Christmas music playing softly, the tree lights twinkling, a small turkey in the oven. The house smelled like the holidays, even though it felt emptier than it ever had. At 3 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emma standing there with a suitcase, her face set with determination. "I'm spending Christmas with my grandma," she announced. Behind her, Michael's car was pulling away from the curb, Jennifer visible in the passenger seat, both of their faces stony with anger. "Emma, honey, your parents—" "My parents are being horrible, and I won't be part of it. I'm 16, Grandma. I can decide where I spend Christmas, and I want to spend it with you." She came inside, looked around at the decorations, and smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "It looks beautiful in here. It smells like Christmas. I brought ingredients for cookies, the sugar cookies with the green and red sprinkles that we always made when I was little. Can we make them?" We spent Christmas Eve baking cookies and watching old movies. Emma helped me set the table for Christmas dinner, folding napkins the way I had taught her years before. We talked about everything and nothing, filling the house with laughter and conversation. That night, as she settled into the guest room that had once been her father's childhood bedroom, she hugged me goodnight and said, "This feels more like Christmas than anything we've done in years, Grandma. Thank you for letting me be here. Thank you for choosing to be here, sweetheart." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. Emma and I exchanged gifts. I gave her a locket that had belonged to my mother, and she gave me a photo album filled with pictures of us together through the years, with a note that said, "For the best grandma in the world, who taught me that love shouldn't have conditions." We cooked dinner together, Emma learning the family recipes that I feared would die with me. She asked questions about spices and cooking times, writing everything down in a notebook she had brought for that purpose. "I want to be able to make these for my kids someday," she said. "I want them to know their great-grandmother's recipes." We had just sat down to eat when the doorbell rang. Emma and I looked at each other, wondering who could be visiting on Christmas Day. I opened the door to find Sarah standing there with Danny, both of them looking uncertain and a little embarrassed. "Mom, I've been thinking all week about what you said, about love not having conditions. I couldn't sit in my house on Christmas knowing you were here alone while we fought about property and money." Danny, now 9 and tall for his age, looked up at me with Samuel's eyes. "Hi, Grandma. Mom says we made you sad. I don't want you to be sad on Christmas." I felt tears start. But these were different tears. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope that maybe not everything was lost. "Come in," I said. "Emma and I have plenty of food." The 4 of us, 4 generations of women plus 1 sweet little boy, had Christmas dinner together. It wasn't the large family gathering I had dreamed of, but it was love, real love, without conditions or ultimatums or hidden agendas. Sarah was quieter than usual, but she helped serve dinner and complimented the food. She watched Emma and me together, seeing something that seemed to surprise her. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with coffee and leftover cookies, Sarah finally spoke about what was really on her mind. "Mom, I owe you an apology. Michael has been persuasive. He convinced me that we were looking out for your best interests, that you weren't thinking clearly about practical matters. But watching you today, listening to Emma talk about your conversations, seeing how you've managed everything, you're not incapable. You're not failing. We were wrong." She paused, looking around the room at the photographs and memories that filled every surface. "This house isn't just property to you. It's your life with Dad. It's where you raised us, where you created all these memories. I understand now why you don't want to give it up. I understand why our practical solution felt like a betrayal." Emma reached over and took my hand. "Tell her about the support group, Grandma. Tell her about the lawyer." Sarah's eyes widened. "What support group? What lawyer?" I told her about everything I had learned, about how common elder financial abuse was, about the legal protections I had put in place, about the stories I had heard from other people in my situation. Sarah listened with growing horror. "Oh, Mom, we were bullying you. We were actually bullying you. You were scared," I said gently. "You were worried about me. And Michael made it seem like there were only 2 choices. Give up the house or be unsafe and alone. But there were other options. There are always other options. What can I do to fix this? Sarah asked. How can I make this right? You can start by treating me like a competent adult who deserves respect. You can stop trying to solve problems I haven't asked you to solve. You can remember that I'm your mother, not your responsibility. Danny, who had been playing quietly with some toys I kept for visits, looked up at us. Are you fighting about the house? Because I think Grandma should keep her house. It has all our pictures in it. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. The rest of Christmas Day was peaceful. Sarah and Danny stayed until evening, helping with dishes, playing board games, just being together without the weight of ultimatums and manipulation crushing the air out of the room. When they were getting ready to leave, Sarah hugged me tightly. I'm going to talk to Michael. I'm going to tell him he was wrong, that we were wrong. I don't know if he'll listen, but I have to try. And if he doesn't listen, then that's his choice. But I won't be part of threatening you anymore, Mom. I won't be part of trying to take away your home. Emma decided to stay another night. As we cleaned up the kitchen together, she said, Grandma, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. It couldn't have been easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, sweetheart. Saying no to people you love is terrifying. But I learned something important. If love is real, it can survive boundaries. If it can't survive boundaries, then maybe it wasn't really love. The week after Christmas, Michael called. His voice was stiff, formal, like he was reading from a script. Mom, Sarah says you've gotten legal advice about the house. She says you think we were trying to abuse you financially. Weren't you, Michael? A long pause. I was trying to solve a practical problem by threatening to abandon me if I didn't give you property worth over $1 million. How is that not financial abuse? Another pause. I didn't think of it that way. Then how did you think of it? I thought you were being stubborn and unrealistic. I thought we knew better than you did what was practical and safe. And now? Now I don't know what to think. Emma won't speak to me. Jennifer thinks I'm a terrible person. Sarah says I've turned into someone she doesn't recognize. He sounded genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand how his reasonable plan had blown up so spectacularly. Michael, do you remember when you broke your leg falling from the oak tree in the backyard? Of course. Do you remember what I did? You stayed with me in the hospital. You read me stories. You sold Grandma's ring to pay for the surgery. That's what love does, Michael. Love sacrifices for the people it cares about. Love doesn't make ultimatums. Love doesn't threaten abandonment. Love doesn't try to take things away from people. I could hear him crying on the other end of the phone. My son, my firstborn, the baby I had rocked and nursed and loved with every fiber of my being, was crying. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I don't know how I became this person. I don't know how I started thinking of you as a problem to solve instead of my mother who deserves respect. I don't know either, Michael. But the important thing is that you recognize it now. Can you forgive me? I thought about it honestly. Could I forgive my son for threatening to abandon me? Could I forgive him for trying to manipulate me into giving up my home? Could I forgive him for making me feel like a burden instead of a beloved mother? I can forgive you, Michael, but I can't forget. And I need you to understand that things have to change. You can't treat me like a problem to be managed. You can't make decisions about my life without including me in the process. You can't threaten to withdraw your love when I don't do what you want. I understand. I do. What can I do to make this better? You can start by having a real relationship with me again. Not as someone who needs to be managed or handled, but as your mother who loves you and wants to be part of your life. You can bring your family over for dinner without trying to solve my problems. You can call me just to talk, not to check up on whether I'm being reasonable. You can trust me to know what I need and want. We talked for another hour. It was the longest conversation Michael and I had had in years, and the most honest. He told me about pressures at work, about financial stress, about fears that he wasn't providing enough for Emma and Jake. I told him about loneliness since Samuel's death, about the terror of aging in a society that seems to discard older people, about how much I needed to feel valued and respected rather than managed. By the end of the conversation, something had shifted. We were talking to each other like adults who cared about each other, rather than like a problem and a solution. It wasn't a magic fix. There would be more conversations, more adjustments, more learning how to relate to each other in this new reality where I was a widow and he was a middle-aged man with his own worries. But it was a beginning. Over the following months, my relationship with my children slowly rebuilt itself on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. Michael and his family started coming for Sunday dinners again, but now the conversations were different. Instead of telling me what I should do, they asked me what I wanted to do. Instead of treating me like someone who couldn't manage her own life, they treated me like someone whose wisdom and experience had value. Emma and I grew even closer. She started spending one weekend a month with me, helping with small projects around the house, but also just enjoying each other's company. She learned to cook my favorite recipes, and I learned about her world of social media and teenage concerns that seemed both completely different from my own adolescence and remarkably similar. Sarah and I developed a new tradition of Saturday afternoon phone calls. Not to check on my welfare, but just to connect. We talked about books we were reading, shows we were watching, memories from her childhood, her hopes for Danny's future. Our relationship became more like a friendship between equals rather than a mother-child dynamic where she felt responsible for my well-being. I continued going to the support group, and I found ways to help other people in my situation. I learned that my experience of setting boundaries and demanding respect was inspiring to others who were struggling with manipulative adult children. Sometimes I felt like I was getting a second chance to mother, not by taking care of people who didn't appreciate it, but by encouraging people to take care of themselves. The house remained in my name, protected by the legal structures Margaret had helped me create. But more importantly, it remained my home. Not an asset to be managed or a problem to be solved, but a place where I could live with dignity and autonomy and surround myself with the memories of a life well lived. I made new memories too. Carmen and I traveled to Florida together, a trip we had talked about for years but never taken. I redecorated the guest room in cheerful yellows and blues, creating a space that was welcoming but no longer tied to my children's presence or absence. I started a small garden in the backyard, replacing the old oak tree that had fallen in a storm with a flowering cherry that bloomed beautifully each spring. Most importantly, I learned to enjoy my own company again. For so many years, my worth had been tied to what I could do for other people, how I could serve my family, how I could sacrifice for their benefit. Learning to value myself, to enjoy solitude, to pursue my own interests without guilt or justification, was perhaps the most revolutionary change of all. 1 year after that terrible Christmas dinner ultimatum, I hosted Christmas again. But this time, it was different. My children came because they wanted to be there, not because they felt obligated. They came prepared to contribute and participate, not just to be served. They came as adults who valued our relationship, not as beneficiaries waiting for their inheritance. Emma, now 17 and preparing for college applications, helped me cook the turkey using techniques she had learned in culinary arts class. Jake, 14 and suddenly taller than his father, set the table without being asked and complimented the decorations he had helped me put up the weekend before. Danny, 10 now and full of opinions about everything, led us in a gratitude circle before dinner, talking about how grateful he was for Grandma's house where we make memories. Michael gave a toast to Mom, who taught us that love means respect, and respect means letting people make their own choices. I'm grateful for this house, not because of what it's worth, but because of what it represents. A woman who built a life and refused to let anyone take it away from her. Sarah raised her glass. To Mom, who showed us that being a good daughter means supporting your mother's autonomy, not trying to control her life. Jennifer, who had been quiet during the original ultimatum but had since apologized for her silence, added, to the strongest woman I know, who taught us all what boundaries look like. As I looked around that table, at faces that were older and maybe wiser than they had been a year before, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt cherished. Not needed, not useful, not tolerated, but cherished. Valued for who I was, not what I could provide. The house that had once felt like a burden I was being asked to surrender now felt like exactly what it had always been. Home. Not just the building, but the relationships and respect and love that filled it. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and looked at the photographs on the mantelpiece. The wedding picture of Samuel and me, still young and hopeful. Pictures of Michael and Sarah as babies, as children, as graduates, as parents themselves. Pictures of Emma and Jake and Danny at various ages, growing and changing and becoming themselves. But there were new pictures now, too. Pictures from my trip to Florida with Carmen. Pictures from Emma's school plays where I sat in the front row, cheering her on. Pictures from Danny's soccer games where I was the loudest grandparent in the stands. Pictures of myself, not always as part of a group, but sometimes just as myself. A woman with her own life, her own interests, her own worth. I thought about all the older people who never get to experience what I had experienced. The transformation from being someone whose worth was tied to their usefulness to being someone whose worth was inherent and respected. I thought about all the people in my support group who were still fighting for basic dignity and autonomy. I thought about how lucky I was to have found my voice and my strength, even if it took me 72 years to do it. But mostly I thought about Samuel. I imagined him sitting beside me in his favorite chair, proud of how I had handled everything, proud that I had protected what we built together, while also insisting on being treated with respect. I did it, my love, I whispered to his memory. I stood up for us. I stood up for me. I kept our home, but more importantly, I kept my dignity. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by my own choices and my own memories. I made coffee in my own kitchen, walked through rooms that held decades of love and laughter, and felt grateful for every single day I got to spend in the place Samuel and I had built together. But I also felt grateful for something else. For learning that loving someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. For learning that being a good mother doesn't mean accepting ultimatums from your children. For learning that your worth isn't determined by how much you can sacrifice or how many problems you can solve for other people. I had learned that respect isn't something you earn by being useful. Respect is something you demand by being human. And I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their bad behavior. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes love means standing up for yourself, even when it's terrifying, even when it feels like you might lose everything. In the end, I didn't lose everything. I lost the illusion that my children's love was unconditional, but I gained something more valuable, their actual respect. I lost the fantasy that I could buy affection with endless sacrifice, but I gained genuine relationships based on mutual caring rather than obligation and guilt. Most importantly, I gained myself back. I gained the knowledge that I was worth standing up for, worth protecting, worth cherishing. I gained the understanding that my life had value beyond what I could provide for other people. The house remains mine, but more than that, my life remains mine. My choices remain mine. My dignity remains mine. And that, I realized, was the most valuable inheritance I could pass on to my grandchildren, not property or money, but the example of a woman who refused to be diminished, who insisted on being treated with respect, who knew her own worth and wouldn't let anyone convince her otherwise. But let me tell you something else. Something I've learned in the 2 years since that terrible Christmas ultimatum changed everything. Standing up for yourself isn't a one-time event. It's a daily practice. It's something you have to choose again and again, in small moments and big ones, when people test your boundaries and when your own doubts creep back in. There are still days when I wonder if I did the right thing. There are still nights when I lie in bed and think about how much easier it would have been to just sign the papers, to move into some sterile senior community, to let my children manage my life and my assets. There are still moments when the loneliness feels overwhelming, when I question whether my independence is worth the price I've paid. But then I remember Eleanor from my support group, who finally got her son evicted from her house and is now taking art classes at the community college, painting landscapes that hang proudly in her kitchen. I remember Frank, who recovered most of his stolen money and used it to take a cruise to Alaska, something he'd always dreamed of doing. I remember Maria, who reconciled with 2 of her children on her own terms, while cutting contact with the one who continued to try to manipulate her. Recovery from family abuse is possible. Rebuilding relationships on healthier foundations is possible. Finding joy and purpose in your later years is possible, even when, especially when, you refuse to let other people define your worth. The hardest part wasn't standing up to my children. The hardest part was learning to believe I deserved to stand up for myself. For 72 years, I had been conditioned to think that my value lay in how much I could give, how much I could sacrifice, how useful I could be to other people. Learning that I had worth simply because I existed, simply because I was a human being with rights and dignity and dreams, was revolutionary. My friend Carmen, who has become like a sister to me these past 2 years, often says that we older women have been invisible for so long that we've forgotten we exist. We've spent so many decades being wives and mothers and caregivers that we've lost track of who we are underneath all those roles. But here's what I want you to understand. It's never too late to remember who you are. It's never too late to reclaim your power. It's never too late to demand respect. It's never too late to choose dignity over convenience, authenticity over approval, self-respect over people-pleasing. I'm 74 now, and in some ways, I feel like my real life is just beginning. Not because I've rejected my past or my role as a mother and grandmother, but because I've finally learned to balance those roles with respect for myself as an individual, with her own needs, dreams, and rights. Emma graduated high school last month, and she's headed to college in the fall to study social work. She says she wants to help people learn to stand up for themselves the way her grandma did. At her graduation party, which we held in my backyard under the flowering cherry tree I planted after Samuel died, she gave a speech about the adults in her life who had influenced her. "My grandma taught me something more important than any textbook could," she said, looking at me with tears in her eyes. "She taught me that love shouldn't hurt. She taught me that family members who truly care about you don't threaten to abandon you when you don't give them what they want. She taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to not enable their bad behavior, even when it's scary, even when it might cost you the relationship. Jake, now 16 and taller than his father, nodded seriously as his sister spoke. Later, he came over to me and said, "Grandma, I want you to know that what my dad did was wrong. Even before I understood all the details, I knew it was wrong. You shouldn't have had to choose between your house and your family. That was stupid." These children, these wonderful young people who are growing up watching their grandmother model self-respect and boundary setting, give me so much hope for the future. They're learning lessons about relationships and respect that I had to learn the hard way. At 72 years old, Michael and I have continued rebuilding our relationship, slowly and carefully. It hasn't been easy. There are still moments of tension, still instinctive reactions where he tries to solve my problems without being asked, still times when I have to remind him that I'm a competent adult who can make her own decisions. But there have been breakthrough moments too. Last month, he called me to ask for advice about a difficult situation with his boss, not to vent or to seek validation, but because he genuinely valued my perspective and experience. We talked for an hour about workplace politics and professional boundaries, and I realized we were having the kind of conversation I had always hoped we would have, two adults who respected each other sharing wisdom and support. Jennifer has also made an effort to repair our relationship. She sent me a long letter last year, apologizing for her silence during the house ultimatum, and acknowledging that she had been intimidated by Michael's certainty that they were doing the right thing. She wrote that watching me stand up for myself had inspired her to examine her own relationships and boundaries. I realized that I had been letting Michael make a lot of decisions for our family without really questioning them, she wrote. Seeing you refuse to be bulldozed made me think about all the times I had let myself be bulldozed, and all the times I had participated in bulldozing other people. Thank you for showing me what backbone looks like. Sarah and I have grown closer than we ever were before. Our relationship now has a quality of mutual respect that was missing when she saw me primarily as her mother who needed protection or management. We talk about everything now: her work, my volunteer activities, politics, books, memories of her father, hopes for Danny's future. She's dating someone new, a kind man named Robert who treats her with respect and admiration. Watching her navigate this new relationship with clear boundaries and healthy expectations makes me proud of how much she's grown from our family crisis. She doesn't try to fix Robert's problems or sacrifice her own needs to keep him happy. She's learned some of the lessons I had to learn the hard way. Danny, now 12 and in middle school, still spends weekends with me sometimes. He helps me tend the garden and we cook together, and he tells me about school and friends and all the complicated social dynamics of being 12. But he also asks me questions about standing up to bullies, about how to know when someone is trying to manipulate you, about the difference between being kind and being a pushover. These conversations with my youngest grandchild are some of the most important I've ever had. I'm passing on lessons about self-respect and healthy relationships that I wish someone had taught me when I was his age. I'm helping him understand that he doesn't have to earn love by being useful, that his worth isn't dependent on what he can do for other people. The support group I joined has become a central part of my life. I'm now one of the more experienced members, someone newer people look to for guidance and encouragement. I've helped 3 other women in situations similar to what I faced, adult children pressuring them to sign over property or assets. One of them, Patricia, was being pressured by her daughter to add her name to her bank accounts for emergencies. When Patricia questioned this, her daughter threatened to limit her access to her grandchildren. With support from the group and help from Margaret, my lawyer, Patricia created appropriate legal protections while maintaining control of her own finances. Her relationship with her daughter went through a rocky period, but it's now healthier than it was before, based on respect rather than manipulation. Another woman, Dorothy, was dealing with a son who had moved back into her house after a divorce and was treating her like free room and board while verbally abusing her and bringing a parade of inappropriate women around. It took Dorothy 6 months to build up the courage, but she finally evicted him and changed the locks. He was furious and didn't speak to her for 8 months, but eventually he reached out to apologize and ask for help getting back on his feet in a more appropriate way. These stories remind me constantly that my experience wasn't unique, but that the outcomes don't have to be tragic. Older adults can reclaim their power. Families can heal from patterns of manipulation and disrespect. It's never too late to demand better treatment. I've also become involved in advocacy work around elder abuse prevention. I speak at community centers and senior homes about recognizing financial manipulation and emotional abuse from family members. It's not easy to talk about these topics. There's still so much shame around admitting that your own children might be taking advantage of you. But every time I share my story, at least one person comes up to me afterward and says, "That sounds like what's happening in my family." Or, "I never thought of it as abuse before." Or, "I thought I was the only one." Just knowing they're not alone, that their situation has a name, and that there are resources available, can be the first step toward reclaiming their power. The house, this beautiful, memory-filled house that was at the center of everything, continues to be my sanctuary. I've made more changes over the past 2 years, updating some fixtures and repainting some rooms in colors that make me happy. I've had the kitchen renovated to be more accessible as I age, with pull-out drawers and better lighting, but I've also filled it with new memories. Carmen and I hosted a potluck dinner for our entire support group last Thanksgiving, and the dining room was full of laughter and stories and gratitude. Emma brings her friends over sometimes, and they bake cookies and do homework at the kitchen table where her father did his homework 30 years ago. Danny practices piano in the living room, filling the house with music again. I've started hosting a monthly book club, and we meet in my living room surrounded by all those photographs and memories. These women, most of them my age or older, come not just for the literary discussion but for the companionship and the implicit understanding that we all have value beyond what we can provide for other people. Last month, we read a book about a woman who leaves an abusive marriage at 65 and starts over in a new city. After we discussed the book, one of the women, Helen, started crying and told us that her son had been stealing money from her checking account for months. By the end of the evening, we had connected her with Margaret, and she was making plans to protect her remaining assets and confront the theft. That's what community looks like. Older women supporting each other, refusing to accept abuse or manipulation, helping each other remember their worth and their power. Samuel would be proud of what this house has become. Not just a repository of our old memories, but a place where new memories are being made, where other people are learning to value themselves, where the love we built here is still growing and spreading to touch other lives. I talk to Samuel sometimes, especially in the evenings when I'm sitting in the living room where we spent so many quiet hours together. I tell him about the children and grandchildren, about my advocacy work, about the women in my support group. I tell him about my small daily triumphs, the moments when I choose self-respect over people-pleasing, when I set a boundary and stick to it, when I refuse to apologize for taking up space in the world. Sometimes I imagine I can feel his presence, his approval, his love for the woman I've become in these years without him. I think he would understand that keeping this house wasn't really about the property. It was about keeping my sense of self, my autonomy, my right to make decisions about my own life. The legal protections Margaret helped me put in place have given me peace of mind, but more importantly, they've given me the confidence to live fully without fear of being manipulated or pressured. The trust that holds the house is ironclad. It cannot be transferred under duress, and it includes specific provisions that my children and grandchildren will inherit only if they maintain respectful relationships with me. But the real protection isn't legal. It's psychological. It's the knowledge that I have worth beyond what I can provide for other people. It's the understanding that love shouldn't hurt, shouldn't come with ultimatums, shouldn't require me to give up my security or my autonomy. This knowledge has transformed more than just my relationship with my children. It's changed how I interact with everyone. Doctors who try to talk to my adult children instead of to me, salespeople who assume I'm an easy mark, even well-meaning neighbors who think they know better than I do what I need. I've learned to say, "Please speak directly to me. I'm competent to make my own decisions." I've learned to say, "I appreciate your concern, but I didn't ask for advice." I've learned to say, "No, that doesn't work for me," without feeling obligated to justify or explain my decisions. These might seem like small things, but for someone who spent 7 decades trying to be accommodating and agreeable and useful above all else, they represent a revolution in self-respect. The most unexpected gift of this whole experience has been the deepening of my relationship with Emma. What started as her teenage rebellion against her parents' treatment of me has evolved into a genuine friendship between a young woman and an older woman who respect and learn from each other. Emma is now 19, and in her second year of college, studying to become a social worker who specializes in working with older adults. She credits our relationship and my experience with family financial abuse as the inspiration for her career choice. She spends part of her summer breaks working with me on advocacy projects, and she's written papers about elder abuse prevention that have been published in social work journals. But beyond the professional connection, we simply enjoy each other's company. She's taught me to use social media to connect with other advocates and survivors. I've taught her family recipes and stories about her grandfather and great-grandparents. We travel together sometimes. Last summer, we went to Washington, D.C. to visit museums and monuments, and she was as interested in the history as I was. Emma represents something precious to me, proof that cycles of dysfunction can be broken, that the next generation can learn healthier ways of relating to each other. She will never think it's appropriate to threaten abandonment to get what she wants from someone she loves. She will never assume she knows better than someone else what's good for them without being asked. She's learning to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. Jake is following a similar path. Now 18 and preparing for college, he's studying psychology and is particularly interested in family dynamics and healthy communication. He's done volunteer work with our support group, helping with technology needs, and bringing a young person's perspective to our discussions. Both of these young people are growing up understanding that older adults deserve respect and autonomy, not management and control. They're learning that family relationships should be sources of support and joy, not arenas for manipulation and guilt. This gives me tremendous hope for the future, not just for my own family, but for society as a whole. Perhaps the next generation will do better at honoring their elders while also respecting their autonomy. Perhaps they will understand that caring for aging parents doesn't mean taking control of their lives. I often think about the woman I was 2 years ago, scared, confused, desperate to maintain relationships even at the cost of my own dignity. That woman couldn't have imagined becoming someone who speaks publicly about family abuse, who helps other people set boundaries, who travels and advocates and lives fully as an independent person. But transformation is possible at any age. It's never too late to remember who you are underneath all the roles you've played for other people. It's never too late to start valuing yourself. It's never too late to demand respect. The winter after my 74th birthday, I received a call from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Rita, and she had gotten my number from Margaret, my lawyer. Rita was 68 and facing a situation eerily similar to what I had experienced. Her 3 adult children were pressuring her to sell her house and move into assisted living, threatening to cut off contact with her grandchildren if she refused. They say they're worried about my safety, Rita told me through tears. But I'm perfectly capable of living on my own. I think they just want access to the money from selling my house. I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose my relationship with my grandchildren, but this house is all I have left of my husband. I spent 2 hours on the phone with Rita that first night, sharing my story and listening to hers. Over the following weeks, I connected her with Margaret for legal advice and invited her to join our support group. I watched her go through the same painful process I had experienced, recognizing that her children were manipulating her, finding the courage to set boundaries, dealing with their angry reaction when she refused to comply with their demands. It wasn't easy for Rita. Her children followed through on their threat and didn't speak to her for 4 months. She spent that first Christmas alone, just as I had 2 years earlier. But she also used that time to connect with other people in our support group, to explore interests she had set aside, to remember who she was outside of her role as a mother and grandmother. Eventually, one of Rita's daughters reached out to reconcile. The conversation was difficult, but it led to a gradual rebuilding of their relationship on healthier terms. Rita's 2 sons have been slower to come around, but they have resumed limited contact. Most importantly, Rita has maintained her independence and her self-respect. Watching Rita's journey reminded me how far I had come in my own healing process. 2 years earlier, I had been the scared woman reaching out for help. Now, I was the experienced voice offering guidance and support to someone else facing the same challenges. It also reminded me that this work of supporting older adults facing family abuse is ongoing and necessary. Every day, there are people like Rita discovering that their adult children see them as obstacles to financial gain rather than human beings deserving respect. Every day, there are people struggling to choose between their dignity and their family relationships. But every day, there are also people finding the courage to stand up for themselves, to set boundaries, to demand better treatment. Every day, there are people reclaiming their power and their worth. Our support group has grown significantly over the past 2 years. What started as 6 or 7 people meeting weekly in a church basement is now a thriving community of more than 20 people who meet regularly and maintain connections outside of our formal meetings. We've become friends, confidants, advocates for each other. Some of our members have reconciled with their families on healthier terms. Others have chosen to limit or end contact with manipulative relatives. All of them have learned to value themselves, to set boundaries, to refuse to accept abuse or manipulation. We celebrate each other's victories, both large and small. When Dorothy got her son evicted from her house, we threw her a party. When Frank recovered his stolen money, we helped him plan his Alaska cruise. When Maria's grandson graduated high school and chose to maintain a relationship with her despite his parents' disapproval, we all cried happy tears. But we also support each other through the difficult moments. The holidays spent alone, the family gatherings we're not invited to, the moments of doubt when we wonder if we're being too stubborn or too demanding. Having this community has made all the difference in my own healing process. It's reminded me that I'm not alone, that my experience matters, that my story can help other people find their own strength. As I approach my 75th birthday next month, I'm planning a celebration that would have been unimaginable to me 3 years ago. I'm throwing myself a party, not waiting for my children to organize something or hoping they'll remember the date. I'm inviting people who celebrate me as I am, my support group friends, my book club, my neighbors who have become genuine friends, Emma and Jake and Danny if they want to come. I'm celebrating not just another year of life, but another year of living authentically, of refusing to be diminished, of choosing dignity over convenience and self-respect over approval. I'm celebrating the woman I've become, not perfect, not without struggles or lonely moments, but strong and clear about my own worth. The house where I'm hosting this party is the same house that was at the center of that terrible ultimatum 3 years ago. But it's also transformed, just as I have been. It's no longer a symbol of something I might lose, but a testament to what I chose to keep. My autonomy, my dignity, my right to make my own decisions about my own life. Samuel's presence is still here, in the photographs on the mantelpiece, in the memories embedded in every room, in the love story that continues even though he's gone. But it's also my house now, filled with my choices, my friends, my new memories and experiences. That's the lesson I want to leave behind. That's the story I hope gives other people courage to stand up for themselves, no matter their age, no matter how scared they are, no matter what it might cost them. You are worth standing up for. Your dignity matters. Love that comes with ultimatums isn't really love at all. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply refuse to be diminished by people who claim to care about you. Have you ever lived something like this? Have you ever had to choose between your dignity and your family's approval? Have you ever had to learn the difference between love and manipulation? Please, tell me in the comments below. Your story matters. Your experience matters. You matter. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that you deserve respect regardless of your age or your role in other people's lives, please like this video and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they have the right to set boundaries, even with family. Share it with someone who needs to know that they're not alone in feeling taken advantage of by the people who claim to love them. Your support helps me keep opening my heart, keep sharing these stories that remind us all that we are never too old to stand up for ourselves, never too old to demand respect, never too old to choose dignity over convenience. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone in this journey of learning to value myself. Thank you for being part of a community that believes love should lift us up, not tear us down. Until next time, remember, you are worth standing up for. You always have been. And it's never too late to start believing that.